Samara stood by the large mixer in the pristine kitchen of Sweet Success, her hands gripping the wooden spoon, heart racing like the batter spinning in the bowl. The smell of fresh pastries filled the air, but all she could feel was the suffocating weight of the situation. Her eyes were glued to the laptop screen in front of her. A video from a meeting with Ivan, her husband's brother, just days before. Cut the staff, used cheaper ingredients, raised the prices to maximize profit. Who cares about quality? Ivan's voice echoed in her mind, as smug as ever. The words felt like a knife to her heart. This bakery was her everything, her pride, her dream, her identity. But now, it was about to be stolen by someone who didn't care about any of that. She took a deep breath, glancing over at the oven where her latest batch of pastries was baking. Her world felt like it was falling apart, but she wasn't going to give up without a fight. It was time to turn the tables. She wouldn't just defend her bakery, she'd take control. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories. The Roots' sun had barely risen, but the warmth of the bakery's ovens was already filling the space. Samara stood in front of the counter, her hands skillfully shaping dough, moving with a rhythm that felt like second nature to her. The quiet hum of the early morning filled the air as she worked, the only sounds being the soft hiss of the espresso machine and the gentle shuffle of flour on the counter. For Samara, this was more than just a business. This was her sanctuary. Sweet Success was a piece of her soul, each batch of pastries a reflection of her love for the craft. Over the years, it had become the heart of the town. People came from far and wide, not just for the delicious treats, but for the warmth that seemed to emanate from the place, a warmth that only Samara could provide. But this morning, something felt off. Her husband, Calvin, usually the first to arrive, had been distant lately. She had noticed the change over the past few weeks, but it hadn't been until this morning that the weight of it hit her. He was late, not by a few minutes, but almost an hour. Samara paused, wiping her hands on her apron, glancing toward the back door as if expecting him to walk in any moment. He was always early, always, when the door finally opened. It wasn't Calvin who stepped through, but Ivan, Calvin's younger brother. Samara froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. Ivan rarely came to the bakery. In fact, she couldn't remember the last time he had shown up uninvited. He had always been the black sheep of the family, the one who never seemed to care much about anyone but himself. Samara didn't trust him. There was something about him, something unsettling that always put her on edge. Morning, Ivan said, offering her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Calvin sent me. He'll be here in a bit, but he wanted me to talk to you first. Samara's brow furrowed. Talk to me about what? Ivan stepped closer, leaning against the counter, his presence filling the space. He was dressed in his usual casual attire, too casual for someone who had come to discuss anything serious. It's about Sweet Success, he began, his tone deceptively casual. Samara's stomach twisted. What about it? Well, family, Ivan said, his voice carrying an odd weight now. Calvin thinks it's time for you to give the bakery to me. Samara blinked, her hands instinctively gripping the counter as if steadying herself. What? Give it to you? You've got to be kidding. Ivan's expression was unreadable, but the slight smirk at the corners of his mouth made her skin crawl. It's just a family tradition. You know how it goes. Calvin thinks it's time for you to pass the business along to me, especially since I'm, well, the one who should take over, right? You've done enough here. Samara felt her blood run cold. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. You've got to be joking. This is my business. Ivan, my life's work. Ivan shrugged, clearly unfazed. I'm just the messenger, Samara. You don't have to like it, but it's what Calvin wants. He says it's for the good of the family, Traditions and all that. Traditions? Samara's voice came out, sharper than she intended. What are you talking about? This bakery means everything to me. I've built this from nothing. I'm not just going to hand it over to you, Ivan. He raised his hands in mock surrender, still smiling. Look, I'm not trying to make this difficult. Just thought I'd give you a heads up before Calvin shows up. He's going to want to talk to you about it too, but I thought you'd want to hear it from me first. Samara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood there, frozen in place, staring at Ivan as her mind raced. This was it. This was the moment she had feared. The family had always been supportive, or at least pretended to be. But now, it was clear. Calvin had made up his mind. This wasn't just a suggestion. He had decided her future for her. But why? Ivan, why now? Why are you doing this? Samra finally asked, her voice quiet but firm. You've never cared about this bakery. You've never shown any interest in it before. Ivan's smirk faltered for just a moment before he regained his composure. I think it's time for a change, don't you? Calvin's right. You've had your time with it. Now it's time to let me take over. The words hit her like a slap. She could feel the anger bubbling inside, but she fought to keep it under control. This wasn't just about the bakery. It was about something bigger. This was about control. This was about family dynamics Samra had never fully understood. She had always worked so hard to keep things peaceful, to keep things running smoothly. But the reality was, Calvin didn't care about her. He didn't care about sweet success. He cared about his brother, and he always had. She didn't trust Ivan. But what hurt more was that she could feel the trust in her marriage slipping through her fingers. Calvin had already made his decision without her. She was being pushed aside, her life's work being handed over to someone who didn't deserve it. As Ivan turned to leave, Samara's eyes followed him. The door clicked shut behind him, but the weight of his words lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. She didn't know what to do next. She had always trusted Calvin. But now, everything was in question. She had to fight. But how? The sound of the back door opening made her turn around. It was Calvin. He stepped in, looking distracted and distant as usual. Samra, he said, his voice tired, we need to talk. Samra could feel the storm approaching, but she wasn't ready to face it yet. Not until she understood everything. Calvin's words would be the key, and she would find a way to protect sweet success, no matter what. The escalation there in the bakery felt thick as Calvin finally walked in. Samara stood by the counter, still staring at the door, her mind racing. She could feel her pulse quicken as the weight of what had just happened settled around her. Ivan's words echoed in her head. It's just a family tradition. You've done enough here. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more behind this. Something more than just a family tradition. Calvin's usual warm smile was absent. His eyes were distant, not the way they used to be when he walked into the bakery. Eager to share his day with her, Samra felt a knot form in her stomach. Something was wrong. He had always been her partner, in business and in life, or at least that's what she thought. Calvin, she said softly, trying to steady her voice, we need to talk. He nodded, setting his briefcase down on the counter and removing his coat. I know. I'm sorry I'm late. Things at work, it's been crazy. He ran a hand through his hair, the fatigue in his expression adding to the tension between them. Samra didn't move. She didn't want to hear about his work. Not now. This was bigger than that. You sent Ivan here this morning, Samra said, her voice quiet, but firm. He came in, said you wanted me to hand the bakery over to him. Calvin's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly composed himself, looking away. Samra, I can't believe you, she interrupted, her voice rising just enough to break through the tension. You want me to give it all away to him, after everything we've built? He sighed, running a hand through his hair again. I didn't want to spring it on you like this, but we've talked about it, Samra. This is the way things need to go. Samra felt her world tilt. We've talked about it. They had never discussed this, not once. She had always been under the impression that sweet success was something they shared. But now, everything seemed to be unraveling before her eyes. You and Ivan have talked about this behind my back. Samra's voice was strained, her heart racing. Calvin, this is my business. I built it. I gave everything for it. You can't just decide for me. Calvin's gaze softened, but there was something unreadable in his eyes, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. It's for the good of the family, Samra. You've worked hard, I know. But we both know that Ivan could take this bakery to the next level. It's what's best for everyone. Samra stepped back, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the counter. It's not just a business to me, Calvin. It's everything. I know, he said, his voice low. But there are things I've been thinking about. 2 things we need to consider for the future. For a moment, Samara stood there in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. It wasn't just a bakery anymore. There was something bigger at play, something she wasn't fully seeing yet. Calvin's voice carried an urgency, a desperation she hadn't noticed before. Before she could respond, the bell above the door rang again, and Serena walked in, her bright smile immediately lighting up the room. She was Samara's best friend and business partner. She had been with her since the very beginning, offering her support and advice whenever Samara needed it. "Morning, Samara," Serena greeted cheerfully, but when she saw the look on Samara's face, her smile faltered. "Everything okay?" Samara didn't immediately answer. She could feel the tension in the room growing heavier. Calvin was still standing by the counter, his eyes not meeting hers. Serena looked from one to the other and then turned her gaze to Samara, sensing something was wrong. "Samara," she pressed gently, stepping closer. "What's going on?" Samara could hardly find the words. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unsure of how to explain the whirlwind of emotions and thoughts that were crashing down on her. It wasn't just about the bakery anymore. It wasn't even just about Ivan. It was about Calvin, about trust, about the future she thought she was building with him. "Ivan came by this morning," Samara said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "He told me that Calvin wants me to give the bakery to him. Just give it away." Serena blinked in disbelief, her jaw dropping. "What, Samara, you can't be serious. This is your bakery. What the hell is going on?" Samara's heart ached. She could feel the tears threatening to spill, but she forced them down. "I don't know anymore. Serena, Calvin, he's been pushing me to do this, like it's nothing. He's acting like it's just some family tradition, something we have to do." Serena's face flushed with anger, her hand instinctively reaching for Samara's arm. "That's ridiculous. He can't just make decisions for you like that, Samara. He's your partner. But this bakery, this is your life's work. He can't take that from you." Calvin's face turned red, his frustration now bubbling to the surface. "I'm not trying to take anything away from her, Serena. I'm just trying to look at the bigger picture. This is for the future of the family. You think I don't understand what Samara's built? I do. But it's time for a change. Time for a new direction." Samara felt as if the room was closing in on her. "A new direction," she repeated, her voice strained. "By giving everything I've worked for to Ivan? A man who's never shown any interest in this business before." "Enough, Samara," Calvin snapped, his tone sharp now. "You don't understand. You don't see the bigger picture. This is about family, and it's about time you start thinking about that." Samara's heart pounded in her chest as his words echoed in her ears. This wasn't just about the bakery. This wasn't about them. This was about control, about Calvin trying to dictate her life, her choices. As the silence stretched between them, Samara's resolve began to harden. She couldn't just stand by and let this happen. She couldn't let them take sweet success from her. Not without a fight. "I'll think about it," Samara said coldly, her voice steady now, a plan forming in her mind. "But don't think for one second that I'm just going to hand over everything I've worked for. Not without a fight." The tension was thick. Samara knew she had to act fast. She wasn't going to let Calvin and Ivan take away what was hers. But she needed a plan, and fast. She wasn't about to lose her bakery without making them regret it. The fight for sweet success had just begun. The explosion. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions, decisions, and careful planning. Samara felt a tight knot of tension in her chest every time she stepped into sweet success. But she refused to let the uncertainty show. The bakery had always been her sanctuary, and she wouldn't let anyone take it from her. Not Calvin. Not Ivan. No one. She spent every spare moment thinking, plotting. Samara knew she had to act fast. Calvin had made his intentions clear. The bakery was no longer hers. Ivan was the one he wanted to take over, and his reasons were cloaked in a vague promise of family tradition. But Samara knew better. This wasn't about tradition, it was about control. Calvin wanted Ivan to have it because Ivan was the one who wouldn't fight back. He was the one who would take orders. And that was exactly what Calvin needed. Samara had made up her mind. She wasn't going to lose her business, but she had to be smart. Ivan was a loose cannon, always scheming, always thinking he was entitled to something he didn't deserve. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. Ivan wasn't just after the bakery. For the sake of it, he had bigger plans. He had his own debts to clear, and he'd probably seen sweet success as the perfect way to fix his financial troubles. She had to expose him, and she had to do it before he could make his move. That night, she called Olivia, the old mentor who had helped her build her empire from scratch, who had always been a steady, guiding hand. Samra needed her now more than ever. "Olivia, I need your help. It's time to stop playing nice," Samra said, her voice tight with frustration. "I'm going to make Ivan show his true colors, and I need to make sure nothing goes wrong." Olivia's voice was calm but firm, just as it had been years ago when they'd first met. "You've got this, Samara. But remember, it's not just about proving him wrong, it's about making sure he can never touch your business again. We need a strategy, not just a confrontation." They spent hours on the phone, hashing out the details. Olivia suggested they use Ivan's arrogance against him. If they could get him to talk freely, expose his intentions, then they could not only stop him from taking the bakery, but they could ensure he'd never get anywhere near it again. Samra knew it wouldn't be easy. Ivan wasn't stupid. He'd have his own defenses up, but he wasn't as clever as he thought. And Samra had a plan, a foolproof one. The next morning, Samra arrived at the bakery early. The early hours were her favorite, when the world felt still and she could focus on her work. But today, her mind was elsewhere. She had called a meeting with Ivan. Under the pretense of discussing the transition, she knew Ivan would show up. He always did when he thought there was something to gain. As the clock ticked closer to the time they had agreed on, Samara felt the weight of the moment settle in her chest. She was about to put everything on the line, but she had no choice. She couldn't afford to back down now. At precisely 10 o'clock, the door to Sweet Success opened, and Ivan stepped inside. His usual swagger was present, but this time, Samara noticed the slight tension in his step. He had something to hide, and she was about to find out what it was. "Morning," Ivan said with a half smile, walking up to the counter where Samara stood. He looked around at the bakery, his eyes scanning the place as if mentally claiming it for himself. "Ready to talk about the future of this place?" Samara held his gaze for a moment before replying, her tone cool and controlled. "Let's talk. But first, let's be clear. This bakery isn't yours for the taking, Ivan. Not without some conditions." Ivan raised an eyebrow. "Conditions? What are you talking about? I'm not just handing it over to you. You're going to have to prove yourself," Samara said, her voice steady. "If you want to take over, you'll need to complete a 3-month training program, and I'm going to need you to get a culinary certification. You'll also need to prove that you're committed to maintaining the quality of the bakery and keeping the staff intact. I'm not letting anyone destroy what I've built." Ivan stared at her for a moment, clearly thrown off guard. He opened his mouth to argue, but Samara cut him off before he could speak. "I know you, Ivan. I know what you're really after. You think this is just about a business, but it's not. This bakery is my life, and I'm not going to let you ruin it because of your own financial mess." Samara's words were sharp, but there was no room for negotiation. This was no longer about the bakery. It was about her dignity, her autonomy. Ivan's face twitched as if he were about to explode. "You have no idea what I'm dealing with, Samara," he said, his voice low, almost dangerous. "This is my chance to get out of the hole I'm in. You think I care about some stupid bakery? You think I care about what you built? This is about me." Samara's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift in his demeanor. She knew this was the moment. She pressed on. "You're not going to get away with it, Ivan. You're already deep in debt. I know about the gambling problems you've been hiding. You've been using Sweet Success as your ticket out, and I'm not going to let that happen." Ivan froze. His eyes darkened, and his face flushed with anger. But Samara didn't back down. She pulled out her phone, hitting play on the hidden recording she'd made earlier that week. She had captured every one of Ivan's admissions, the ones where he had freely confessed his intentions to exploit the bakery for his own gain. The room went still as Ivan's voice echoed through the quiet bakery, his words betraying him. "I'll fire the staff. I'll use cheap ingredients. I'll raise prices and make a killing off this place. No one will even know. Ivan's expression twisted into one of fury as he realized what was happening. "You can't do this. I can." Samra cut him off. "I've already got everything I need. You're not going to take this from me. Not now, not ever." The realization hit Ivan like a tidal wave. He was caught, exposed, and there was nothing he could do about it. He tried to make a run for it, but Samra had already called the police. Within moments, they arrived, and Ivan was arrested for attempted theft and breaking and entering. The storm Samra had feared had come crashing down, but this time, she was the one standing tall. As Ivan was led away in handcuffs, Samra watched him with a mix of relief and satisfaction. But this wasn't over. There was still much to be done. The battle was won, but the war for sweet success was far from over. Samra had her work cut out for her, but she wasn't afraid. She had proven that when it came to her dream, she wouldn't back down. Not for anyone. The aftermath police car pulled away, its sirens fading into the distance. The tension that had gripped Samra for so long began to lift, but the weight of the past few days still lingered heavily in the air. Ivan's arrest had been a victory, a significant one, but Samra knew that the battle for sweet success was far from over. There were consequences to face, decisions to make, and a future to rebuild. As the last of the officers left the bakery, Samra stood frozen in place, staring at the empty doorway. The door that Ivan had walked through earlier now felt like a threshold to her future, a future she could finally claim as her own. She turned to Serena, who had been standing beside her, offering silent support. Serena's expression was a mixture of relief and disbelief, her eyes wide as she processed the events that had just unfolded. "Samra, you did it," Serena said quietly, stepping toward her. "You actually did it." Samra nodded, her throat tight. She felt a rush of emotions, exhaustion, anger, and finally, the smallest sense of triumph. But it wasn't over. She still had to face Calvin. "I still need to deal with Calvin," Samra said, her voice low. "I don't know what's going to happen next, but I can't let him think this is just over." Serena reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to face him alone, Samra. I'm here. You've got this." Samra forced a small smile, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. But even with Serena by her side, Samra couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that lingered in her chest. Calvin had known what Ivan was planning. He had been complicit in the whole thing. Samra had always trusted him, but now everything felt like a lie. Hours later, the door to sweet success swung open once more, but this time it was Calvin who stepped inside. His expression was grim, his eyes tired, as though he hadn't slept in days. Samra felt her pulse quicken, a mixture of dread and anticipation flooding her senses. "Samra," Calvin said softly, his voice low and hesitant. "We need to talk." She didn't answer immediately, taking a moment to collect herself. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading. Her husband had betrayed her, and now she had to face the consequences of that betrayal. "What do you want, Calvin?" Samra asked, her voice steady but cold. "I came to explain," he said, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "I never wanted things to get this far. I didn't know what Ivan was planning. I didn't know he'd go that far." Samra didn't move, her gaze hardening as she watched him. "You knew exactly what was going on, Calvin. You knew about his debts. You knew he was using sweet success to get out of them. You didn't stop him. You didn't care." Calvin flinched at her words, his face paling. "Samra, please listen to me. I never wanted you to lose the bakery. I just thought." "You just thought what?" Samra cut him off, her voice rising in frustration. "That handing over my life's work would be the best solution, that I just let you and Ivan take everything from me. You didn't even ask me. You didn't even think about how much this meant to me. You didn't think about us." Calvin opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He simply stood there, his shoulders slumping as the weight of her words settled on him. Samra turned away, unable to look at him any longer. "I'm done, Calvin. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when you've been making decisions about my life without me, without us." For a long moment, there was only silence. The air between them felt thick, charged with the weight of the betrayal, the hurt, and the lingering sense of loss. Calvin took a step forward, his voice trembling. "Samara, I'm sorry. I should have told you. I should have been honest. I never meant for things to go this way. But I'm asking for a chance to fix it. I'm asking for a chance to make it right." Samara turned back to face him, her eyes cold. "You had your chance, Calvin. You had my trust, and you broke it." The words felt like a finality, a door closing that could never be reopened. Calvin's face crumbled with regret, but Samara couldn't bring herself to care anymore. She had given him so many chances, so many opportunities to do the right thing, but he had chosen his family's agenda over her own. He had betrayed her trust. "I'm done, Calvin." Samara repeated, her voice steady now. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm taking back everything you've tried to take from me. Sweet success is mine, and I'm going to make sure no one can ever take it from me again." Calvin stood there, looking as if the world had just crumbled beneath his feet. But Samara wasn't about to show him sympathy, not anymore. As he turned and walked out of the bakery, the finality of his departure hit Samara like a tidal wave. She didn't feel the rush of relief she expected. Instead, there was just a deep, hollow ache in her chest. But she wasn't going to let that stop her. She had a business to run, a life to rebuild, and she wasn't about to let anyone, least of all Calvin, take that away from her. Later that evening, Samara sat down with Olivia, Serena, and Maggie. The weight of the day still clung to her, but there was a new sense of clarity in her heart. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for it. She smiled as she looked around the table at the people who had become her chosen family. They were her support, her strength, and her allies in this new chapter of her life. "I couldn't have done it without you all," Samara said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for everything." Olivia raised her glass, a proud smile on her face. "You're stronger than you think, Samara. This is just the beginning." And for the first time in a long time, Samara truly believed it. She had fought for what was hers, and she wasn't going to stop. Sweet Success wasn't just a bakery, it was her dream, and she was going to make sure it thrived. No matter what, the journey had been difficult, but Samara had come out on top in the end. It wasn't just about protecting her business, it was about reclaiming her power, her dignity, and her future. The story was far from over, but Samara knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to lose again. The aftermath from Serena's perspective: I've known Samara for as long as I can remember. We met back in high school, both of us outsiders in a small town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. From the moment we became friends, I knew there was something special about her, something fierce and unwavering in the way she approached everything in life, whether it was school, family, or even the first time she baked a batch of cookies. You could see the determination in her eyes. She didn't just do things, she poured her heart into them. I'd been with her through all of it, from the days when she could barely pay the bills, to the moment she opened the doors of Sweet Success. That bakery wasn't just a business for Samara, it was her life's work. It was everything to her. It was where she found her true self. And when I saw Calvin and Ivan plotting behind her back, I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. From the outside, it was easy to see how Samara trusted Calvin. He was charming, supportive on the surface. He made her laugh, made her feel like she was enough. But I always saw the cracks. I saw the way he would look at Sweet Success as if it wasn't her creation. It was something to be managed, something to be controlled. There was an arrogance in him I couldn't ignore. And when Ivan appeared that morning, asking Samara to hand over everything she had built, I knew things had gone too far. I was there when she called me, her voice trembling. I could hear the frustration and hurt in her words. But what stood out most was the quiet resolve. Samara had always been a fighter, but now she was fighting for something deeper. She wasn't just protecting her business anymore, she was protecting herself. She was taking back control. I watched her plan. It wasn't just about exposing Ivan for who he truly was. It was about taking ownership of her life again. I could see the hurt in her eyes every time she talked about Calvin. She loved him. She really did. But the way he betrayed her trust, that broke something inside her. And that's when I knew this was no longer just about family or business. This was about Samara reclaiming her identity, her worth. She had spent so many years giving everything to others, But now, she was putting herself first. When I saw Samara standing there, confronting Ivan in front of everyone, I felt a mix of pride and sadness. Proud because I knew how much courage it took to expose the truth, but also sad because I could see how much it hurt her. There she was, fighting for everything she believed in, and yet, it wasn't just the business she was losing, it was a part of her heart. The person she had trusted most had betrayed her, and that was a wound that would take time to heal. After Ivan was arrested, Samara didn't look like the same person. She looked relieved, but there was a quiet sadness in her eyes, too. I knew she'd won that battle, but the war wasn't over. The real challenge would be healing, rebuilding, and learning to trust again. What no one else saw, though, was how much it took for her to get here. How many times she had held it together. How many sleepless nights she spent worrying about the bakery, about Calvin, about everything. No one saw how much she sacrificed to make this dream a reality. No one saw how much of herself she had given away until there was nothing left but the fight. But now, as I stand beside her, watching her make the hard decisions and take back control, I know one thing for sure: she's stronger than she knows, and this time, she's going to make sure. She's the one who gets to decide her future. The aftermath. Final reflection. Samara stood alone in the middle of sweet success, the smell of fresh pastries filling the air, but it felt empty in a way she hadn't experienced before. The last few days had felt like a whirlwind, a storm of betrayal, confrontation, and unexpected strength. Now, as she gazed around the bakery, the place that had been her sanctuary for so long, it felt like the first day of the rest of her life. Her heart was heavy with a quiet sadness. Yes, Ivan was arrested. Yes, she had exposed his manipulative plans. Yes, she had confronted Calvin and, finally, freed herself from his control. But all of that came at a cost. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. And as much as she wanted to feel victorious, there was a part of her that mourned the relationship she had once had with her husband, the trust that had been shattered, the love that now felt distant and hollow. Calvin's departure hadn't been easy for Samara. It wasn't just about the business, it was about the years they'd spent together, the dreams they had shared. He had been her partner, the man she had thought she could count on. But in the end, Calvin had chosen family over her. He had chosen the idea of tradition, the lure of financial gain, over their shared vision. And in doing so, he had exposed his true self, selfish, blind to her sacrifices, and willing to exploit the one thing that mattered most to her. As Samara reflected on everything that had happened, she realized something profound. This wasn't just about defending her bakery, it was about defending her dignity, her right to control her own life, her future. Sweet success had been more than a business, it was her life's work. But in fighting for it, she had found a part of herself she had almost lost, the part that could stand up, face the truth, and fight back when it mattered most. She thought about Maggie, who had exposed Ivan's deceit at the wedding, choosing to walk away from a life built on lies. She thought about Serena, Olivia, and the other women who had stood by her side, supporting her when she needed it most. And in that moment, Samara knew one thing with certainty: it was the people who chose her, who stood by her when the world seemed against her, who mattered. They were her real family, not the ones who tried to control her, not the ones who betrayed her. Karma had a way of working things out. Ivan, desperate and greedy, had been exposed for who he really was: someone willing to sacrifice everything, including family, for his own gain. His lies had caught up with him, and now he would face the consequences. But it wasn't just him who had to pay. Calvin, too, would face the fallout from his own choices. He had betrayed Samara's trust, and no amount of regret could erase the damage he had caused. But the story didn't end there. Samara had survived. She had fought for her dreams, her autonomy, and her integrity, and in the end, she had triumphed, not just because she had exposed the lies and deception of those who tried to take what was hers, but because she had remained true to herself. She had chosen to protect her vision, her values, and her future, no matter the cost. Now, with sweet success secured and her future in her hands, Samara looked forward to the next chapter. She didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: she would face it on her own terms, and that was all that mattered. The fight wasn't over. there would be more challenges ahead. But Samra was ready for them. She had already proven that when everything was on the line, she wouldn't back down. Message of empowerment in the end. This story is about the power of standing up for yourself, no matter the odds. It's about having the strength to fight for what is rightfully yours, even when those closest to you try to take it away. It's about understanding that betrayal, while painful, can become the catalyst for personal growth and empowerment. And most importantly, it's about knowing that no matter what happens, you always have the power to choose your path. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight for our own dignity and future. But those are the battles that make us who we are.